Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here. In today's video, we'll be doing a review and how to play video on the Zombicide 2nd Edition board game, so let's get into it. Alright, now that we've got the game out, let's walk you through the basic setup and general idea on how you play the game, and then I'll jump into my review after that. So the basic premise of Zombicide is there's been a zombie outbreak, and you're playing as a few of the last survivors in the world. And then how the game is set up is you'll play through multiple different missions or scenarios, all with their own unique objectives, and you'll need to achieve those while all the players survive to win the game. And so the game can be played for 1 to 6 players, and you can also choose a mission based on difficulty and average play time, which is nice when you play the game. There's kind of an overarching narrative to all the missions, but you can certainly play the missions out of order if you want to and have a fun experience. And so the first thing you'll likely want to do is choose a mission and then set up the game board according to that mission. And so this mission that we're setting up right now is M9, Might Makes Right. And so it's just a little breakdown of the mission. It breaks down the map tiles that you're going to use, how to set them up, where the players start, where the zombie spawn points are, any special rules, and then the overall objective of the mission as well. Now, when you look at the board, you can see there's different map tiles laid out, and then you can see there's also different crates, which are objective tokens for the red, and then pimp crates for the yellow. And on the board, you'll actually see those in the graphics. So when you're setting up the board, those will go in that specific spot every time. You'll also see these door tokens for an open and closed side. And what's nice with the Zombicide 2nd Edition is that those doors are just printed right on the graphics of the various buildings. So again, you'll know exactly where to put them when you play. The standard doors are the red doors. There's also blue and green doors, but those are only used in special missions of the game, which usually have some additional significance to them based on the mission you're playing. You'll put your survivors on the blue starting point, which in this case is right over there for this specific mission. You'll also want to set up your player board. So in a Zombicide game, you're going to play as 6 different characters, split up among the number of players that you're playing with. So for example, if you had 3 players, everybody might control 2 characters. If you're playing with 2 players, each one has 3, or if you're playing solo, you're controlling all 6 characters. So there's a bunch of different characters to choose from in the base set of the Zombicide 2nd Edition. But what you'll do is you'll set your experience meter to 0 here, use the different colored pegs for that character, you'll set your health to the starting point, you'll unlock the initial starting ability, and that's the basic setup for your character boards. Now once this is done, you're going to take the starting equipment cards, which are the gray cards here, shuffle them up, and then deal them among the different characters. Now technically the character with the fire axe is going to be the first player here, so you can use the first player token here to designate that. And then how the game is going to work when you play, whoever has this first player, that character and all the other characters on that player's team will go, and then it will move on to the next player after that until all the characters have played. And so when it comes to playing, there's some different actions that you can use on your turn. And so each player is going to start with 3 different actions they can use. And so some of them can include movement. And so one movement would be 1 space on the board. Some characters might have special abilities that would allow them to move multiple spaces. Now another thing to note is that when it comes to movement, if there's zombies in that same location, it does hinder your ability to move quite a bit. So for example, normally when you would move out of a spot, it would just be 1 action and you would take 1 movement. However, if there's zombies in that same location, you need to add an additional action for each zombie in that location. So for example, if Wanda wanted to leave that location, the one with the purple base there, instead of just being 1 action to move out of that, it would actually be 3. So 1 for the basic movement, and then an additional 1 for each one of the zombies. Now another thing to note along with this is that kids, basically all the people that have the little smiley face backwards hat emoji on their character card, are children, and they have a built-in slippery ability. And so how slippery works is that once per turn, a character can leave a location that's full of zombies, and it still only costs 1 movement to do so. So it doesn't matter if there's abominations, there's brutes or fatties, or the runners, or 20 zombies and your character. If you have the slippery ability and you haven't used it yet, you could leave that location for just 1 movement. But again, just as a general idea, 1 movement is an action, and you can move 1 space. Your character could move again like I'd mentioned, but then if they're in a location with a closed door, they could also open a door as an action. And so how you would do that, you'd need to have a card equipped that has one of the door symbols on the top. And there's also 2 versions of this, as you can see. So there's a version with the blue ear, and then also a version with the yellow ear. So the blue ear means that it makes no noise when it's used to open a door, and the yellow ear means that it does make noise when it's used to open a door. And so as you're playing the game, when you cause noise, that can attract zombies to that location. So in this case, let's say we did open that door. It's now open. And so now that this is a new open area, you need to spawn zombies in that location. And so what you'll do is you'll spawn zombies based on the dark rooms on the map. So in this case, there's just the 1 dark room. So what I'll do is I'll flip up one of these zombie cards, and now zombies will spawn according to what the card says. Now you can see here there's a bunch of different numbers, and so what this means is you'll take out of your characters the character that has the highest experience, and whatever color that's in, that's then how many zombies you'll spawn. So in this case, everybody is in the blue zone, so it'd spawn 3 walkers, but then this is also a walker rush card, which means I would spawn them and then also give them 1 activation. So again, I would take 3 zombie statues here, place them in that room, but in this case, since it was a walker rush card, they would also activate. And so the walker zombies will take 1 action, and that can be either moving or attacking. So in this case, they'll move towards the nearest survivor, and since they only have 1 activation, they wouldn't attack at this point. But potentially next turn they could. Now another thing that you could do, let's say for example you were in a building and there weren't any zombies there. So let's say this character was in that room. You can do a search action. And so how that works, again, it's 1 action, and you would search this blue deck here, and then you would draw one of the cards on the top. And so now this can be added to your inventory. And so when this happens, I can place it either directly in my hand for that character, or in the backpack for the back row. If an item is in your hand, it can be used for combat or used. Other cards will go in the backpack. Those can't be used for combat there, but some cards would specifically say can be used from the backpack. So just something to pay attention to. Other actions I could do, again, if I'm in a room and there's one of these objective tokens, the red boxes here, I could take that and I would gain 5 experience for my character. So I would just move the counter up 5 points, or again in the Zombicide 2nd edition, they're called adrenaline points. You could also loot a pimp crate, so those are the yellow ones here. If you do that, you'll actually take one of the red special weapons, and again, similar to the other cards, when you collect this, you can place it directly in your hand, or again, you could put it in your backpack as well. The red special weapons are typically much more powerful than your traditional weapons you'll find either as a starting weapon or from the deck. Another thing that you can do on your turn is reorganizing your items and trading items between characters. And so how that works, characters must be on the same location if you are to trade, but it doesn't need to be an even trade necessarily. So if I just didn't want this nail bat and I wanted to give it to Wanda and we were both on the same spot, for example, I could just do that. I wouldn't need to trade something from Wanda to Bunny G in this case to make that happen. That does require an action. Same with reorganizing your inventory. Let's say, for example, you had some items in a character's backpack, but you wanted to move that into their hands so they could actually use it. Reorganizing would count as 1 action. Now, another option that you can do on your turn is you can perform combat. And so there's 2 types of combat. There's melee combat and ranged combat. So melee combat can be used in close proximity of your player. And so in order to tell, you'll see it has the little knife symbol here. This means it's a melee option. The first number is the range of the attack. So 0 just means on the square that you're on. The next symbol here are dice. And this means that's how many die you'll roll to carry out the attack. So in this case, you'll roll 1 die. The targeting option here is the accuracy. And what that means is you need to roll a 4 or better for the hit to land. And the final number is the total amount of damage that you'll do for a successful attack. And then again, it also has the ear symbol. This time it's blue, meaning it doesn't make noise to use this attack. Now with melee attacks, you can actually target a specific zombie or enemy in the location you're at. With a ranged weapon, that is not the case. So in a ranged weapon, like a pistol here, you can see it has the gun symbol, meaning it's a ranged weapon. It has the bullet type, meaning the type of bullet it has. This is also a dual wielding option. So if I had two pistols, I could have one in each hand because of this double knife symbol. Again, same concept. Distance, it could be in my area or 1 square away. I'll roll 1 die. I need a 3 or better. It does 1 damage and then it does make a noise. So for example, if I used a gun in this location, I could shoot into this area. When I did shoot, I would need to leave a noise token there. Now in this option, since I'm shooting into a crowd where a survivor is located, there is the opportunity for friendly fire. And so what that means is that if I roll the die and I miss or fail, so in this case I need a 3 or better, I got a 5 in this case, so that was successful. So I would kill one of the zombies and then I would gain another experience point for that character. But let's say, for example, I rolled and it was a 1. Since I shot into a location that had a survivor and I missed, it would cause friendly fire, so I'd actually have to wound Wanda in this case and bring her health down by 1. Another thing to note is the priority order when targeting with ranged weapons. And so how this works, it starts with brutes or fatties and the abominations, walkers and then runners. So if you think about it, it's kind of like slowest to fastest. And so again, if you're shooting into a crowd and there's a brute there, you need to kill that brute first before targeting other zombies. Another thing to note is that zombies and walkers all have 1 health or need a 1 damage to kill them. Brutes, however, need a weapon that does 2 damage to kill them. So for example, I'm looking at this nail bat, you can see it does 2 damage. So you could kill a brute with this. One thing to note though is that damage does not stack. So for example, with this baseball bat, I can roll 2 die, so I might have 2 successes, but each success will only do 1 damage. So that does not add together for a total of 2 to take out a brute. It just does 1 damage, so it'd be ineffective against brutes. Same thing with abominations. They require 3 damage to be taken out, and so none of your base weapons can actually do that, so you'll need to find a Molotov cocktail throughout the item deck searching for it in order to use that and take out an abomination. Another thing to note is that abominations are worth 5 adrenaline points, or basically the experience points when you kill them. All the other zombies are only worth 1 adrenaline point when you kill them. There are some weapons that also say reload on them, and how that works is that you'll be able to shoot them once on your turn, but then you'll need to use an additional action to reload the gun before shooting again on that same turn. However, if you shoot a gun and it's not reloaded by the end of the turn, the next time it goes back to that character, it will be reloaded without costing an action. Also, if you trade a gun that has been shot and has yet to been reloaded, it needs to be reloaded before that next player can use it. Another option that you can do on your turn is actually getting into cars or driving cars. So if you're on a location with a car, you can get into it and get right into the driver's seat, or you could get into a passenger seat as well if you choose. You also have the option to drive the car. So you could drive the car slowly, and in that case you're going to move 1 space. However, you could also drive fast and drive 2 spaces. And when you do that, you actually attack those locations as well because you're driving fast enough to do damage. Couple additional notes with this: if you drive fast, you're going to attack based on the numbers on the card here. This does have the potential for friendly fire if there's both zombies and survivors in the same zone. However, if you're driving through a zone that's all survivors, they can quickly get out of the way and avoid harm. So you will not suffer from friendly fire in that case. Another thing that you can do is that you can actually search cars. So in a police car, for example, it's like taking a search action in one of the abandoned rooms. However, you'll keep drawing cards from the item deck here until you draw a weapon. Or sometimes there's cards that will summon a zombie. It's like an card. So if you find one of those, you'll have to stop searching as well and summon that zombie. The Pimp Mobile will also often have a pimp crate on it that you could search to get a high level weapon. But again, just consult the specific mission you're on to know if that's the case. So again, once all of your players have done all their moves that they're choosing to do, again, you don't have to use every single action for a player, but once all the turns are done, you'll move on to the zombie phase. And so how this works, all the zombies on the board are going to activate based on the type of zombie they are. So regular walker zombies have one activation, which again is they'll either move or they'll attack. For each zombie in a location with a survivor, if they do attack, each individual zombie will cause 1 wound. And you can distribute that among all of the different survivors in that space. There's other zombie types called runners. These activate twice. So they could both move and attack on a turn, they could move twice, or they could attack twice, depending on the situation. There's also brutes or fatties from the original Zombicide. These activate once and can move about the board or attack. Now there's a few rare monsters called abominations. These are the most terrifying enemies throughout the game. They also will just activate once, but they're extremely hard to kill, and depending on which abomination is out there, they might have additional special abilities. Another thing to note is that when it comes to zombies and them moving and activating on their turn, there's a kind of a priority order of how that works. So the first thing is that a zombie will move towards a survivor they can see. And so that basically is their line of sight. And so how that works, again, it's a straight line of sight when you're outside between buildings. You can see all the way to the edge of the board or into a wall if that happens to be the case. So in this case, the zombies would move 1 space towards this character. Now when we look at this runner, for example, they can't actually see a character within line of sight. And so how that works, they're going to move towards the noisiest location. And so again, this is why making noise matters. So when you're looking at the board here, each character themselves creates 1 noise, and then any additional noise token would create a noise. And so for example, we're looking across the board, this character is worth 1 noise, this character has 1 noise themselves, and then a noise token, so a total of 2, and then this over here has a total of 3 noise. And so how this works, again, 3 is the winner, it's the highest number. So this runner is going to move the shortest distance possible to that location. So again, runners get 2 actions, so they'd then be at that location. Now again, same thing with the fatty. They can see both locations, but this location is noisier, so they're going to go that way. Now another thing you can do on your turn is actually make noise. So if you are a single character, maybe you're trying to draw the horde away from other people, you can go ahead and make noise to draw the horde away from that location. So maybe not use the most, but it is an option that you can do on your turn. Now another thing to note, if it was ever a tie for the amount of noise and the distance where a group of zombies need to travel, that group will split apart. And so if it's an even split, they'll each go, in that opposite direction. But if it's not an even split, players will just choose where that additional zombie or piece goes to. So once all the zombies on the board have activated, the next step is to spawn zombies onto the board. So how this works, you're just going to start at the number 1 location and then just spawn clockwise around the board. So again, you would flip up the first card. In this case, everybody still happens to be in the blue zone. So I'd summon 2 walkers to that location. Then again, I would move on to the next spot. Summon the players here, so again 3 walkers go to that location. Then again I would finally summon the final spot. So as we can see here, I'm summoning an abomination, but thankfully all my players are in the blue zone, so I actually don't have to summon anything, so nothing happens for the zombies on that point. At that point, it's just going to simply start to the player's turn again. And again, when it goes to that specific player's turn, how it works at this point, since it's after the first turn, they can play any of the characters they control in any order they choose to, using all of their actions or some of their actions, again, whatever suits the player best, trying to complete the various objectives throughout the mission, collecting better equipment, killing zombies to level up, and eventually trying to clear the mission. A couple other quick notes. Players on their turn, when they get to the next level, they'll actually unlock the next ability. So in this case for Wanda, when she hits the yellow level, she'll unlock an additional action on her turn. When you get to the orange level, the next level up, you actually will choose between 1 of 2 of the abilities here. So again, you'll pick one that you like, move on to the next, And if you hit the final level here at the top, again, you'll be able to choose one of the 3 red options to add to that ability for Wanda. Again, this is how every character functions. Players will lose the game if they cannot clear the mission or if one of the characters is defeated. So it's kind of all or nothing in this game. That's a little bit different than the first edition of Zombicide, but it seems to work well so far playing the game. Overall, that's the general idea on how to play the game. There's a little bit more detailed rules in the rulebook, obviously. If you're not sure what different abilities are, those are broken down in the rulebook as well. But if you have additional questions, certainly feel free to leave a comment, and I'll try and get to them when I can. But also consult the rulebook as well if you have additional questions. But now that you have a better idea on how the game works, let's jump into my review. Alright, well now that you have a better idea on how the game works and how it's played, how do I actually feel about it? Well, for me, the first edition of Zombicide was already one of my favorite board games. It's a great zombie-themed dungeon crawler that has a really high replay value, super high quality components. It can be a bit tricky to learn at first, but once you get the system down, it flows very easily through every single aspect of the gameplay, and I really enjoy it. And with that said, the first edition of Zombicide was already one of my favorite board games, and so I wasn't sure if I really wanted to make the upgrade and check out this second edition. But once I took a look at some of the different components and some of the differences in the rules, it made a lot of sense to upgrade to this second edition version. And a lot of the things I think are really streamlined, especially when it comes to the initial setup of the game, playing the game itself. For example, on the map tiles, there's little door frames already on the various buildings, so you don't necessarily need to look through the scenario book every time to see where each door needs to go, or where the different loot crates are hidden throughout the level, because that's already just built in right on the board, and so you can just place them where they need to go, and this really streamlines setup. On top of that, you have the character boards in this version of the game, which help track your health, the items that you have, ones that are equipped in your hands, ones that are in your backpack. It tracks the various abilities you have with your characters, and certainly that was a part of the first edition game, but they really streamlined that process and made it a lot easier, and that just saves you a lot of time. It's a lot less clunky to play, and I really enjoy that aspect within this second edition of the game. On top of that, there's a ton more missions, so even if you played the first edition of Zombicide, they've added a lot more missions to this rulebook that you can play through. On top of that, you get access to a lot of new characters. I'm not sure if all of those characters were possibly in expansions from the first edition of Zombicide, but again, there was a bunch more characters in this set of the game compared to the first edition that I have as well. And so that was nice to add more replay value and more variety to the game. They've also clarified some rules that were maybe a little bit confusing or didn't necessarily fit this theme exactly in this second edition compared to the first edition. So for example, in the first edition, if you were to fire a ranged weapon into a crowd of zombies where there also happened to be other survivors in place, you would actually target the survivors first no matter what. And to me, that never really made a lot of sense, why you would automatically kill your other survivors before even attempting to target other zombies. But in this second edition, they've revamped that, where you'll target the enemies as normal, but if you miss your range shot, then you would hit and wound your survivors in that same zone. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. If you're going for zombies, you're shooting and you miss, you might accidentally suffer from friendly fire, which is the case in this second edition. And so I think that fits a lot more thematically and makes the game a lot more fun as well. One key change I'm not necessarily sure how I feel about though is the fact that in this second edition you cannot have any survivors die. If any survivors die, you lose the mission that you're on. I'm still trying to really get a grasp on that, if that really makes the game easier to some extent, where I definitely felt like in the first edition I would have team members die off from time to time, or sometimes the only way to get past the mission felt like you might need to sacrifice a character to get the other survivors to safety, where in this version of the game that's not really an option. So some of the missions, even though they maybe had a hard listing, we never really found ourselves losing. And so again, I don't know if that means that overall the difficulty is just less in the game because no survivors can die off. I'm sure I'll need to play several more games till I get a full feeling of that, but either way, I think it's fun either version. I think that gives another element to the game where you need an even higher level strategy to be able to complete the missions. But another factor that maybe makes the game a little bit easier is that there's a lot more specialty weapons and they seem to be a little bit easier to get compared to the first edition of Zombicide. So there's various different pimp weapons or special weapons that you can get in this version of the game, and there's a lot more of them to choose from, which I definitely like. It adds to the strategy and makes it worth getting some of these high-level treasures throughout the game. On top of that, another cool feature is that there's different types of abominations in the game. So in the first version, there was just the one abomination that, again, you needed to do 3 damage to take out. So really the only option was using a Molotov cocktail. Still the same idea in this one, but there's also unique special abilities that each unique type of abomination has. So again, when you randomly draw that throughout the missions from time to time, that can add another unique element to the gameplay, making missions and replay value go up every time you play. I also think the game plays incredibly well no matter how many players are actually playing in the game, so you can play this game solo or you can play up to 6 players. The style of gameplay doesn't really change at all. You would just be controlling multiple different characters depending on how many people are playing in the game. I think this also maybe makes it a little bit more accessible as well if you happen to be playing with new players, where you might give them 1 or 2 characters versus a lot of different characters that they have to manage and juggle. So if you're really familiar with Zombicide and have played any of the other versions, I think you'll pick this up really quick. The rulebook can seem a little bit overwhelming, but like I said, once you get the first general flow of the turn sequence from your first game, it really starts to streamline the process and makes a lot of sense, and it's easy to spawn the zombies and take your player turns as you go throughout the game. Another thing that I like about the game is the fact that in the rule book, when you're choosing different missions, they give you like a general difficulty score for the mission and then also the approximate time it's going to take you to complete that mission. And in my experience going through many missions throughout the rule book, those time frames are actually really accurate. So I think that can really help you decide what missions you might want to play depending on the other players in the game, if you want a more challenging mission, if you want a simpler one, or even if you're set to certain time constraints, that can help you pick which missions you want to choose. Another cool thing is that beyond just the missions included in the rulebook, which there are many, there's an active community for the Zombicide series, and so people are often posting their own unique missions that they've created, and the company itself is also releasing regular missions that you can play for free on an ongoing basis to continue to enhance the replay value of the game, as well as releasing additional expansions over time for the Zombicide series. So it definitely has a high replay value, and you're going to get your money's worth with all the missions and available content out there for the Zombicide series. Overall though, I really enjoy Zombicide. It's one of my favorite board games. I think this second edition is a great option. Even if you played the first edition or have the first edition, I think the additional features like the character boards to manage your characters, the more streamlined setup, and improved rules make it even more fun than the original, and I highly recommend it. But let me know in the comments below if you've played Zombicide before, if you enjoyed the first edition, if you're finding you like the second edition better, what are some of the best expansions to play in the game? Have you played the Black Plague version of Zombicide? I haven't yet played that one, but I'm excited to check that out as well. Let me know in the comments below. And if you guys like this video, be sure to smash that like button as it really helps out the channel. And if you'd like to pick up a copy of this game, there'll be links in the description below where you can do so. And if you like videos like this on video games, board games, and everything nerdy, check out one of our other videos here. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.